this lecture is on historical urban landscape, approach, toolkit and actions. So, here I will discuss this particular concept of HUL, or it is also known as an approach, the historical urban landscape approach, and I will explain why this is regarded as a point of departure in heritage conservation and management understanding, recommendations and guidelines. Then I will discuss a little bit of the historical context, the trajectory and development of this concept of HUL. Finally, the definition, it is a big, broad, but very comprehensive and robust definition of what this approach is all about, and then the toolkit, because a toolkit is needed for the implementation of this approach into actions. So, what about the toolkit and what the toolkit is all about? And then of course, a little bit further details of the approach and the achievable outcomes that are expected if this approach is implemented into actions. Finally, I will end this presentation with a discussion on the applications and criticisms criticisms by criticism also to the application of SWOT through a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Now, coming to the trajectory. So, HUL is a concept. So, you can see here that in 2011 this approach, the HUL approach, the historic urban landscape approach was adopted by the United Nations recommendation, but it has a history, it has a context, it has a trajectory of development. So, what happened is that in the first decade, in the early part of the first decade of the 21st century, lot of clashes and conflicts were actually going on among the different lobbies, lobbies including the tourism lobbies, the tourist sector, the currents and trends of globalization and hyper urbanization, and also the development experts about the future of cities, because it was quite clear by then that very soon the urban context will be different, because the rate and scale and intensity through which this urban was kind of expanding, the world was becoming urban, was it was phenomenal. So, within this changing context, within this transforming context, it was very important about how all these the different aspirations of the different interest groups and lobbies could actually be taken into consideration. And there were a lot of debates going on about the construction of very high buildings, the residential buildings and also office spaces, where we could actually see skyscrapers in cities like Dresden or Vienna, Budapest and all European cities mainly. So, in 2005 this Vienna memorandum was signed, and there was a declaration on the conservation of historical urban landscape, and this was the 11th declaration on the conservation of the setting of the heritage structures, sites and areas, again deriving from ECOMOS. So, and then several workshops, several programs, several debates and case study applications where there were pilot case study applications of this larger concept of preserving historical urban setting or landscape. And then there were important conferences held in 2007 in St. Petersburg and also one in Olinda, but there were multiple other discussions and debates among the experts, world's experts on heritage conservation. And finally, in 2010 in the 33rd session of the UNESCO General Assembly, this draft was recommended, and there was a mandate which was kind of put forward by the World Heritage Committee that this historic urban landscape recommendation had to be finalized and adopted by the UNESCO in the next year, that is 2011. And from there on, the trajectory is still moving, and India is also now part of this game, and we will discuss it separately, but it is important for us to know that how the implementations are also taking place and how more and more countries are have become interested, and they are also trying to adopt this approach. This is a big definition, but this is a very, very important definition. You do not need to mug it up, but you just need to pick up the keywords, because the keywords are important and they are not they should not be segregated. When I say keyword, there is a danger that you may segregate them from their larger context, but that should not be the case. But you just pick up keywords and then you also position, situate and place them within the larger context and understanding, then I think you will be able to internalize. So, this definition where in the recommendation it is said that what is HUL, what is historic urban landscape? It is the urban area understood as the result of a historic layering. Now, this layering is very important, because in the previous conventions also we like do not see this, we do not get to know about, or we do not I mean the previous conventions did not discuss this layering. And you remember the way Sardowski and the other critics try to critique the other conventions. So, they brought out this particular argument that the city as layers, as strata, how the city building processes had been, how the city had interacted with its environment, with the socio-political cultural milieu. These layers did not find much mention or space or understanding in those previous conventions. So, here it seems that UNESCO, it seems that UNESCO actually picked up from those criticisms, and then the experts tried to include, tried to accommodate all those critical perspectives and develop this robust understanding and approach called HUL, or historic urban landscape. So, this concept of layering is there, that city as understood as a city as an outcome, as a result of historical layering of cultural and natural values. So, this is very important. And attributes. So, cultural and natural values and attributes extending beyond the notion of historic sense. This is also very important, that preserving an urban area is not just safeguarding its historic center, but also the peripheral aspects, the larger settings that actually shape urban nature or urban in that sense. So, it is beyond extending beyond the notion of historic nature or ensemble to include what? To include the broader urban context and its geographical setting. So, this wider context includes what? Notably the site's topography, geomorphology, hydrology and natural features, its built environment, both historic and contemporary. So, large scale, long term temporalities and long term spatial attributes and values. Its infrastructures, technology, above and below ground, okay, also below ground. So, city is not only what we see at the surface level, but it also has invisible layers. As for example, if you think about like water structures, so far as a particular city is concerned, the wires and even the electricity, electric wires and the galvanized iron wires and several. So, it is like just the water supply system, if you can think of, or if you can think of sanitation system. So, they are also part of the heritage of built environments and the urban. So, it is important to include the surface level phenomena, events, components, materialities and also the hidden attributes. Its open spaces and gardens, its land use patterns and spatial organizations, perceptions and visual relationships, as well as all other elements of the urban structure. So, this is so comprehensive. It also includes social and cultural practices and values, economic processes and the intangible dimensions of heritage as related to diversity and identity. So, understanding our cities in this way provides us with important knowledge to guide planning decisions and manage change. So, that is why HUL is considered to be a very landmark point of departure kind of a policy guiding principles that try to take into consideration all these several aspects when they interact with each other, how the urban how the urban shapes itself, and also in turn kind of shapes all other components that are part of this larger historic urban fabric. So, you see this layers of the city. So, everything is there, you know, in whatever you had learnt in the definition: cultural practices, urban structure, economic processes, topography, diversity, built environment, geomorphology, hydrology, everything, you know, all the different layers. The layer understanding will also get more important when I will show you another picture from another, you know, case study. So, this is the whole approach all about, because and also it's also understanding the integration across all these different components from layers, heritage, setting, and management. So, layers old, new, across multiple temporalities, heritage, different aspects, tangible, intangible, hard, soft, everything, setting, nature and culture, and nature and culture as an embedded whole, and management, the stakeholders, partnerships, community, and everyone who are part of this process. So, like the HUL approach, it is about, you know, kind of focusing on the integration among cultural, economic, and social aspects, and where you cover everything, like from built environment to intangible heritage to cultural diversity to socio-economic activity to environmental features and local community values. So, these are the key factors in HUL, and these are the key parameters. So, again, you know, like this HUL approach is very comprehensive, because it integrates several aspects together, and this is from the, again, like if it's possible, you can go through this HUL guidebook. It is not a very large document, and it is like, it is very interesting because it has a lot of interactive elements in it, full of photographs, and like, because it's very vibrant, you know. I personally like this HUL guidebook a lot. So, these are some of the key important features or dimensions that are there in the concept. So, what is this concept all about? It integrates social, cultural, environment, and economic characteristics together in the planning process. It encourages doing that. Then it is a very flexible, dynamic approach. What do we mean by this? We mean by this that, you know, there are like not universal standardized guiding principles that are suggested, but there are guiding principles, but it can change, it can you know, transform, because when the local specificities also change. So, what you are taking or what you are deriving from Budapest may not be similar from Berlin, even Berlin, you know, even another European city. Then again, what you pick up from Berlin may not be similar in Kolkata, okay, because different old and new layers, different types of cultural and natural heritage for different cities. So, flexibility is the key word. Flexibility and dynamism has to be there, and it actually, you know, kind of offers that kind of flexible and dynamic ambience or setting. So, then it is also important because it considers various urban issues and focuses beyond heritage conservation and helps to increase city livability. This is also very important, because it is not only about, you know, just conserving big structures, and then from conservation of big structures to conservation of the historic city centers, okay, then also to include maybe the marketplace there, fine. But you know, when we are kind of thinking of restoring a marketplace and building it in a like eco-friendly or in a like aesthetic manner, what should not be missed and misrecognized are also the livelihood aspirations and the livelihood needs and interests of people, communities, you know, and also the more marginalized communities. So, the livability of the city has to be ensured. So, here also there is a stress on livability of cities. Then it also focuses on developing sustainable planning solution, because, you know, I must tell you that why this HUL is so important, because here you see urban heritage or urban natural and cultural heritage is understood from a larger conceptual framework, which also establishes clearer links with sustainable development processes. So, that is also one of the very significant dimensions of the HUL approach. Finally, it also focuses on developing and providing high infrastructure services and involve the people in the process. This is very important because everyone has to be involved, no one can be missed out, and it is important to, because for city utilities is so important. If the water system, if the sanitation do not work, then the city, whether you preserve a palatial building or a marketplace or a city center, do not make much sense. So, that understanding is also there in the approach of HUL. Okay, so now you need a toolkit, because ultimately it has to be implemented practically. So, there has to be ground actions. So, HUL also offers wide range of interdisciplinary and innovative tools, which are broadly kind of classified under these 4 categories: civic engagement tools, knowledge and planning tools, regulatory systems, and financial tools. And here are the explanations about each of these tools and what do they imply and mean. So, for example, civic engagement tools, it empowers to identify diverse stakeholders and help to understand and learn about history of community, tradition, values, needs and aspirations. So, the citizens, the community, they need to be engaged, they have to be very important stakeholders in decision making. Otherwise, because experts, okay, they have the expertise because they have the standard knowledge and they really are the experts of the field, but they may not be experts so far as a particular locality is concerned. So, when you are applying this expert knowledge on a particular locality, the understandings, the experience, the aspirations of the local communities, local stakeholders also need to be taken into consideration. So, that is what has also been emphasized in historical urban landscape toolkit, the engaging civic engagement tool. So, this is the way through which they are talking about accommodating or including the local stakeholders. Then knowledge and planning tools. So, why these tools knowledge planning tools are important? Because it help to protect the integrity, authenticity of the area. So, you need to have that local knowledge again. So, and it also helps in developing the database which will help to improve quality of life for the area. So, you need to have data, you need to have information so that you can manage or you can come up with a step by step methodology so far as the conservation or the restoration processes are concerned. Then there are regulatory systems. So, regulatory systems are important to set up rules and regulations, of course, norms and acts for managing of tangible, intangible elements of heritage, including social, economic, environmental features. So, after all, you need you need legislations, you need acts, you need laws that people would obey, people would adhere to, people would follow because those laws and legislations will then ultimately make the model work in action, right. And finally, finance. This is also very important. So, financial tools, they focus on how to generate income, yes, in using innovative financial mechanisms to support and safeguard the heritage values of areas, because otherwise it is a very costly process. So, there also, I mean, some form of revenue generation has to be kind of thought upon, otherwise these projects by themselves are not sustainable. So, financial tools is also one of the very important categories in this toolkit of HUL. Okay, so, the HUL approach in action. On the left hand side, there are it talks about the 4 steps that are involved in this HUL approach in action. It include surveys. Surveys is very, very important, again a keyword, and this also makes this approach distinct and unique from the previous all the previous conventions that we had covered in the other lecture, and the charters and several other policy documents on heritage, because this is unique because it provides lot of emphasis on surveys and mapping of the city's resources, because once the survey, once the situation analysis are not done, then you do not know a city, and once you do not know the city and its urban fabric, then how can you plan heritage conservation and actions. Then to reach a reasonable degree of consensus, because everyone has to be on board, okay, there may be disagreements, but then a consensus has to be reached using participatory planning and stakeholder consultation, stakeholder arrangements, which we had already discussed in one of the, this also of course in one of the tool it's part and parcel of one of the toolkit in HUL in civic engagement. Then assessing the vulnerability of the attributes regard to socio-economic pressures, impacts of climate change. So, this also the another important feature of this whole approach is that it like really stresses a lot so far as the changing environment, the like the new sets of stresses that the cities are facing now within the larger context of the Anthropocene or climate change or global environmental change for that matter. So, one needs to assess the urban vulnerability first and then plan heritage preservation. Then integrate urban heritage values and their vulnerability status into a wider framework of city development, because I had told you that that the departure point in HUL is that it establishes a clearer link with sustainable development and planning processes. So, that is what is there in this fourth step. Fifth step is about prioritizing policies and actions for conservation and development, and the sixth step is, this is important, again part of the financial tools in the toolkit, establishing appropriate partnerships and local management frameworks. So, it is also part of the civic engagement tool as well for each of the identified projects. So, who will run these identified projects? So, it is important that you kind of identify and activate a local network of people who would then regularly monitor and execute and also enforce the different components of the project under expert supervision or guidance, where there is lot of scope for open discussions and consensus, right. The picture at the or the image at the right hand side is very important, because we discussed about the layering thing, right, and in the definition that the city is a layered entity, that is very much there, that understanding is there. So, you see this is from the Ballarat project in Australia. So, it is a success story how HUL has been implemented in Ballarat, and Ballarat, like I have personally been there, and of course, you go there and you feel that you can actually feel part of multiple historical times. So, you go there and you see artifacts, you see things, but it is not still just like it does not give you a feel of a monument as when you enter into a monument, but it gives the feel of a city. But a city as an outcome of layered and differentiated and diverse temporalities and spatial and cultural components and attributes. So, here you see the layering, all these different layers that shape urban the urban fabric, these are there, from geology to infrastructures to built environment to tangible intangible dimensions. So, it is important to identify all these layers, because once you also identify these layers from the practical point of view, you are also able to select the priority areas of action. So, that is quite important. What are the expected achievable outcomes? Of course, if you do not need to even go through this slide, because you just think about the dimensions, you think about the approach, and you think about the categories in the toolkit, and you understand like what should be the achievable outcomes. So, the feasible achievable outcomes would be strengthened sense of place, very important, improved planning design, higher land property values. This again is something where the social scientists have tried to criticize this concept a bit, and then more high end service sector businesses, attracting more tourism activities, high revenues for heritage management and maintenance efforts, achieving the sustainable development goals for the new urban agenda. This is also quite important. So, wide scale application is taking place. So, if you remember the trajectory slide from 2001 post 2011. So, in 2011, after this was adopted and finalized, then in the next few years from 2012 to now, there has been applications, in several so far as several cities and several projects and programs are concerned. So, from Rawalpindi in Pakistan to Quito in Ecuador, from Suzhou in China to Ballarat, I already discussed, in Australia to Istanbul, Turkey, Fez, Morocco, several cities have taken up several projects applying this HUL approach. But there are some challenges as well. Again, I am referring, I should refer to Sadowski, because I had learned this from his article mainly, and some from some other sources, that it is also the approach. It is not that it is totally innocent and absolutely linear, and it is it has only positive things in it, because there are also some disincentives, there are also some like limits, again limitations, and it had made grave application challenges so far as some cities are concerned, including like Hong Kong and Stockholm in Sweden, Toronto in Canada and all. So, we will not go into the details of it, but this gives us an understanding that every approach also has its own limitations. And one major point that has been raised by the critics is that there are a lot of ambiguities in terms of like how do we define values, what do we understand by attributes, because there is not a common or general understanding about values or attributes, because it also changes, it also change across space, time, cultural context. So, how could these experts kind of talk about values and attributes as sacrosanct categories? And then this is a very important point raised by Veldpause, that there is a little bit of lack of clarity on power and responsibility distribution between stakeholders. Okay, you involve all the stakeholders, you involve the local stakeholders, but then the cognitive configuration that we always have, like differentiating between expert and non-expert. Are we always ready to really listen to the voice of the so called quote unquote non-experts whom we think are non-experts because we are experts in the field, and that makes the situation very messy. So, how to co-create design and co-implement actions when we have not been able to overcome the cognitive apartheid? And if we say that okay, we have overcome that cognitive apartheid, so how can we prove that that is the real situation? So, these are some of the criticisms to the HUL approach. And I will not go through the details of it, but these two slides, this SWOT analysis is there. What are the strengths of HUL, and this is internal when applied in a particular space or context. So, for example, just let me give one example, and they are like also two sides of one coin. So, for example, HUL is defined as management approach. So, you know the 6 critical steps already, but then the weakness is the implication of focus on processes are hidden. So, how to move from one step to the other, but the results can be broadly radically different, and if you like start moving from one step to another in so far as different city contexts, urban contexts are concerned, then it is not true that you will actually achieve similar sets of outcomes or results, right. And then Sadowski again, for example, he has pointed out that this 2011 recommendation on HUL is a large step forward, true, as it brought a shift in the ways of thinking, yes, but it is not free from criticism, often proving to be difficult to implement. Yes, it is beautiful, it is really constructive in terms of what it had laid out really, but then it is, I mean, from theorization to implementation to enforcement and evaluation, these are big things. It is not so easy, I mean, even if the policy is beautiful, but what are the ground level challenges? So, one can really talk about that after 20 or 30 years from the implementation of the approaches of any approach. So, so we have to wait a bit and also learn from the challenges and mistakes at different city levels as well. And also another important point that he raises is that above all, still remaining only a recommendation, right. This is a recommendation, it is not a mandate, it is not an obligation by for every city government, for every municipal administration to actually apply HUL. So, this is beautiful, this is important, but how I mean how can we ensure its application in the most inclusive and comprehensive manner possible? These are questions that are still needs to be answered. Similarly, opportunities and threats. What are the opportunities? Again, two sides of the same coin. So, for example, system of attributes, I am picking up the fourth one. So, system of attributes and values can support revealing differences in place, time, culture, and the threat is that there are implicit preferences, bias, there are bias, that shape every stakeholder. So, how can we kind of overcome those biases? There is not much discussion on that, and I honestly, for me, like personally, I believe that the pilot tests, case studies, and the programs, the events where HUL has been applied, from all these case studies only we will be able to understand the approach better, and also inform the approach from the empirical outcomes that will be generated in each of these urban contexts. So, we have to wait a bit for that more, I think. These are the references, go through some of them, because you like for example, you can go, of course, go through the HUL guidebook, that will be very important, but also go through Sadowski's points of views and criticisms, and Weltbau's, for example. And Sadowski is also important because he not only talks about whole, but he talks about urban cultural heritage as a whole, and also provides some important information about the even conventions and charters, UNESCO conventions and charters. So, here we had learned and we had studied the whole concept and the context also, toolkit, approach, outcomes, and of course, the concept has been placed and understood within the larger historical context of its need and adoption. Then we know now that how otherwise very comprehensive and robust this approach is, and that is why and how it is a point of departure. And then we had also discussed a bit about the inadequacies and the limitations and problem areas that have been identified by critics for more efficient and effective course of actions in the future.